1 out of every 9 XRP available on the open market vanished yesterday. We're going to get into what is happening with the XRP supply. ETFs and DATs, treasury companies, are putting the squeeze on what is left available on OTC desks. Then they come for the exchanges. I'm going to catch you up on everything that you need to know. I also looked into some information about the DTCC and sufficient liquidity. I wanted to explore this idea, so I hope you enjoy that towards the end of the video, but let's just get into this. Yesterday, 6.5 billion XRP, 1 out of every 9 circulating, vanished from exchanges in a single day. Perfectly synchronized, 50% drops across every major centralized exchange. This isn't retail. This is the biggest coordinated XRP exodus in crypto history. Something massive is happening. And I know you're looking at a bunch of numbers on the screen here, and I will make this easier, but I just wanted to put all these balances up. If you would like to pause it and read through this in your spare time, please do so. There is another a little bit easier to understand graph here, so let's go through this one. XRP exchange meltdown or reshuffle. Today's on-chain data shows one of the largest synchronized drops across all major US exchanges. All major exchanges, not just US. Here's what just happened. Massive outflows across the board. Here is Upbit. Here is Binance, minus 2.56 billion. Bithumb, minus 7.7 billion. Uphold, eToro, Bitbank, 50% each outflows, which means XRP is disappearing at crazy rates. This is actually what you want to see, right? You want to see XRP being either purchased or taken off of these exchanges, because if there's no XRP available on these exchanges, the price can only really go one way. As we start to eat through that supply, as the supply goes lower and lower and lower, that's where a market cap multiplier could come in on those inflows and really supercharge that market cap. And that's what a lot of people are predicting, like the Jake Clavers of the world and the domino theories, but he is predicting a super thin supply of XRP and a big boom here with market caps. All right. Nearly every major exchange saw 50% balance drop, suggesting large-scale users withdrawals, potential migration to self-custody, internal rebalancing or cold storage moves, or major on-chain reshuffle events. So it could be any one of these things. You kind of be the judge. It could be a little bit of everything too, guys. I mean, obviously, it would be great if it's just being bought open and transferred to self-custody or cold storage or something like that. But there's probably some reshuffling going on here between exchanges and OTC desks too. Because you got to remember, the ETF providers are buying from OTC desks. Now, the ETF providers, they need more XRP because they can see the balances on those OTC desks dwindling. And so they need to go to Binance and Bithumb and these other OTC desks that might have more XRP, and they're buying it from them. That is what I understand this to be, all right? Because you're not seeing it on the price, right? So this means it's happening in the back channels, right? To keep the price from going up or down. Eventually, you're not going to be able to do that if the supply keeps dwindling. Bright spots, Evernorth up 13.36%. Coincheck, massive inflow plus 550 million XRP. OKX shows a bizarre plus 10,000 spike, possible address reclassification. So maybe OKX found some XRP. They're like, oh guys, I got good news. We found $1 billion worth of XRP in a wallet we thought wasn't ours. Imagine trying to explain that to your boss. Heavy declines. You saw Coinbase minus 99 since February. KuCoin, Paribu, Swissberg minus 100%. Grand total exchange XRP 15.86 billion XRP, down to 6.5 billion since February. So here you go. We had about 16 billion XRP on exchanges earlier this year. Now we are about 6.5 billion. Something big is happening with liquidity. Stay alert. Watch the flows. On chain never lies. All right. Am I following this person? Let's just give him a follow since he's putting in the work. And let's see here, Toasty. Let's give Toasty a follow too. That way we can keep up to date. Now, I want to better understand if this buying keeps happening like what we are seeing right now. Obviously, markets change. People start to anything could happen. But if the demand keeps up, where are we going to be in the next 12 to 24 months? Let's explore that together. At current ETF accumulation rates, visible exchange supply would be largely exhausted within 12 to 24 months, but total circulating supply would not run out because large off-exchange holders and Ripple's escrow can still feed the market at higher prices if spot buying keeps absorbing 500 million to 1 billion XRP per month into ETFs. The path is toward a structural liquidity squeeze and a much higher clearing price rather than a literal end of trading, obviously. I did a whole deep dive into, could Ripple start selling escrowed XRP to institutions in the United States? You cannot do that, right? Because of the judge's order. I even wanted to dig into, could Ripple Prime start to do that? Because Ripple owns Ripple Prime, they cannot. And so these exchanges might not be able to, these OTC desks, if they're especially here in the United States, they might not be able to go to Ripple to get this XRP. Now, if they had a company outside of the United States, that company could buy from Ripple, right? It's just companies inside of, and so I'd imagine there's going to be some type of shuffle and moves. And when we get that information, I will bring it to you first. Key numbers now, circulating supply. We talked about this a lot. Current US spot XRP ETFs already hold about 339 million XRP, around 0.5% of the circulating supply after their first month. Maybe it's been about 2.5 weeks, with about 644 million in net inflows and 676 million assets under management. So this is the total of what we're seeing right now, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll keep you up to date. Exchange balances already falling fast. For example, Binance XRP reserves are around 2.7 billion and at multi-year lows. Multi-year lows. Love to see that. And analysts warn that ETF demand plus long-term accumulation are driving a growing supply crunch. How long until exchanges dry up? We did briefly talk about this. I mean, roughly, if we did 500 million to 1 billion XRP per month continuum, you'd be looking at 12 to 18 months before the supply is just like completely gone. Obviously, there's some scenarios that could happen sooner that could bring this down a lot. Like if the BlackRocks of the world or Fidelities or the Vanguards decided to offer XRP products, this number could dwindle even faster. But also, if this number starts to really dwindle and we get like below a billion XRP left on exchanges, you are going to get a much higher price. And so you wouldn't be able to buy as much XRP. And the asset would become a lot more liquid. And I think a lot of people would feel a whole lot better looking at their portfolio of XRPs at 20, 30, $40 or something like that. I think people would be very excited. And this is the type of thing where XRP could just shoot up $90, $100. We've seen that on Kraken and a few other exchanges. So, don't say it's not possible. Right now, I have never been the most excited to get up and come and record content because there's just so much going on and it's never been this busy, right? All right. And then where does XRP come from next? Once easy exchange inventory is mostly drained at current prices, additional XRP has to basically entice onto the market long-term retail and whale holders, including those self-custodying on Ledger, etc., who will only part with their coins at much higher price levels. So someone's going to have to sell. This is what I get back to, right? At what point are these institutions that own a lot more XRP than retail traders, where are they going to sell at, right? If you have a billion XRP and that XRP is at $50, you have $50 billion, right? Are you going to hold for 500 or 1,000? Like that is what you're going to run into. And some exchanges or some institutions understand this is a long-term play. We're not looking at holding XRP for a year or two. We're looking at holding XRP for 20, 30 years, right? They understand that it's going to grow in value as the industry grows in value. And so it really is going to be, I think, retail traders that miss out the most here. They're going to take some of these lower prices, not knowing that in a few more years, this thing is going to go parabolic as the market does itself, right? The assets with the most utility are going to win the most, right? Ripple's invited to all of these meetings where they can talk about regulation and policy, right? They're in the US, they're in the UK, they're in the EU, they're in Africa, in the Middle East. Everywhere you look, Ripple is there with their team and they're building out the future of everything here, the fintech. All right, OTC and institutional desks that source from these holders on exchanges, but must then mark up those prices to compensate the scarcity risk. Ripple's escrow releases 1 billion XRP per month. This is really what's going to make or break the market, I think, right? Because if Ripple drops all of that XRP on the open market, that's going to be really, really bad. And I don't think they will, but I think they're going to get a lot of pressure, right? You'd imagine that Ripple is getting a lot of phone calls right now. Hey, is there anything left in the escrow? What kind of deal can we make? And Ripple, you got to imagine, there's some of the smartest people in the world work at Ripple. They're looking at what's going on in the market here too, and they're not going to make any drastic moves, I don't think, but I'll bring it to you. All right, Chad says it's 11-day average scenario. Let's take our newly established 11-day trading scenario and scope it out. Keep in mind, only Canary has been online for 11 days. The rest is only a week or less. Assume this is an average of 5 funds over the same period of time. 11 days of trading, 317,666. 934 XRP, 20 trading days, you're at 635,000 XRP. And then, 12 months, if you kept up this price and this demand, 7.6 billion XRP, which is basically less than what's on exchanges. This is no underestimation, including outflows, due to the fact that we do not have data for what would happen when we have 12 funds running in full steam. This does not account for BlackRock entering the market. Again, the models are telling us exactly 1 year from now, unless the price increases substantially, the entire XRP supply will be gone forever. There you go. Chad does a really good job putting information together. If you're on X, follow Chad. We don't agree on everything, but he's a good hardworking dude, and I really appreciate all that. All right, Paul Barron says approaching 1 billion XRP in the first 30 days, and of course, that is not what I wanted to do. Great. I love that this Grok thing always asks you on everything to ask it something. I hate that. Can I just stop that? All right. That's the plan. XRP supply on exchanges is dropping. Over 180 million XRP left exchanges recently, tightening the available supply. Shane Ellis theory in real time. I just did an update video on Shane Ellis just a few days ago. If you don't understand what the Shane Ellis theory is, go to my channel and just look up, research Shane Ellis theory. It's a great video. It included RLUSD and how that could supercharge the theory. And then XRP supply on exchanges drops 45%. in 60 days. Now, let's move a little bit to the DTCC stuff here. Remember that the DTCC's Project Ion project has made it clear that the world's largest clearinghouse will only adopt digital assets if they have sufficient liquidity. So this is something that stood out to me when I was just reading through this. I was researching a video, and sufficient liquidity. What assets would qualify as having sufficient liquidity? You start to look at your XRPs and the Bitcoins of the world. But really, are you going to be using Bitcoin for settlement, or are you going to be using XRP for settlement, right? What would be the better choice there? Because you're not just settling in US dollars, you could be settling in euros and yen and all kinds of different currencies. The infrastructure is ready. All that's missing is the price. And that's why ETFs have been launched to provide some liquidity so that XRP can start being used. I thought that was a great little clip there. And then I said, I just wanted to look at this a little bit more to better understand this. Sufficient liquidity for DTCC essentially means having enough high liquidity or high quality liquid resources to meet all payment obligations on time, even if the single largest member or member family defaults under extreme but plausible stress conditions in line with the Cover 1 standard in US clearing agency rules. Liquidity here is about same-day, intraday, multi-day settlement capacity, not just trading volume or market cap. So that's really good to know. What sufficient liquidity means: DTCC defines liquidity sufficiency as holding qualified liquid resources that allows each clearing agency to settle on time, even if the participant family with the largest aggregate liquidity exposure fails to pay. So when I say participant family, I think this is financial institutions, family offices, these types of things. These resources must be reliable in stress, available in relevant currencies, and immediately monetizable: cash, committed credit lines, and high liquid securities. We know that the new system is moving towards stablecoin and cash bank deposits online. This is kind of the infrastructure that we are going to see, and having the ability to have different currencies all over the world. This is why you have a Europe-backed stablecoin on the XRP ledger and a Real-backed stablecoin on the XRP ledger. You're going to get a yen-backed stable. You're going to get, quarter 1, 2025, you're going to have RLUSD going live in Japan. I'd imagine you're going to have some kind of announcement of a RL yen stablecoin in Japan. And so all of these different countries will have their own representation on the XRP ledger of the currency, and that way you can cover everything, right? How much liquidity the DTCC needs? The DTCC does not publish a single public number for how liquidity it needs for all businesses. Instead, its subsidiaries calculate daily and would be required to cover the largest participant default, historical Cover 1 liquidity requirement, and then size cash, credit facilities, and supplemental deposits to do that figure. For example, the Depository Trust Company, which is the DTC, Settlement Services describes maintaining qualifying liquid resources through all cash participants fund plus a large combined 364-day credit facility calibrated so that the total resources remain sufficient to satisfy the Cover 1 standard under stress market conditions. So, this is a whole lot of jargon. I get it, but I just thought this was very interesting, and I kind of wanted to know. So, that's what we do on this channel. We find things and we just dig. We dig, baby. Give me the information. All right. The DTCC clearing, qualifying liquid resources. Things are like cash in clearing, participants' funds, committed banks and credit facilities, and proceeds on default liquidity facilities secured by high quality securities. These are similar in spirit to Basel III high quality liquid assets, also known as HQLA, such as cash, central bank reserves, and government securities. In its tokenized collateral pilots, the DTCC has treated tokenized US treasuries as the primary digital asset for liquidity purposes. Now, this was a sentence I was getting ready to get to. What is Ripple doing right now on the XRP ledger for tokenized US treasuries? Well, they're working with BlackRock and Ondo on some of that, right? Open Eden. There's multiple ways you're going to be able to do this on the XRP ledger to access these 24/7, 365 through RLUSD. And I'd imagine there's going to be other avenues to do this. And so the first thought here is, if it's tokenized securities or tokenized treasuries here, excuse me, are there tokenized treasuries on Bitcoin, right? You understand, like, this is what they're looking to use. And so if you're looking at a bunch of assets that the DTCC might use, just go look, right? Do they have US treasuries on this and on this? And so you can go through them to better understand that. I'm going to do that here later on today. DTCC, digital asset work, and which assets qualify today. We kind of talked about this a little bit. I don't want to kind of reiterate myself 10 times, but here's some of the crypto assets that the DTCC has designated to interoperate with. The DTCC patent and related analysis describes an architecture designed to interoperate with multiple public chains, listing Bitcoin, Ethereum, Hedera, BNB Chain, Flow, Tron, Tezos, Cosmos, Ripple's XRP ledger, and I think Stellar too, if I'm not mistaken. Being named as technical compatible does not mean the DTCC is currently settling or clearing in those tokens. It means its middleware can, in principle, tokenize, can control assets on those networks when regulation, demand, and liquidity makes sense. Top assets in context and practice. The top assets for DTCC right now for tokenized treasuries and other traditional securities used as collateral, because already meet regulatory definitions, high quality liquid assets, and DTCC's risk framework. Among native crypto assets, the ones that most strategically positioned from the DTCC's own technical documentation are major chains it explicitly engineered compatibility for, which are Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Hedera, and BNB. Okay, those are the ones. All right, a few other things here before we jump. Canary reports this morning that they have 158 million XRP under management. That's a whole bunch. And you know what? This video has already gone too long. I'm going to hold this for another video, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great weekend. I hope you're learning and growing, and I hope this makes it fun. If you got any value, you can like the video. You can share the video. You can leave a comment down below, but just thank you for being here. I'll see you next time. Peace.